The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows, where we discuss the hidden themes and deeper layers in movies and TV shows. I'm your host, Jeff Haecker, and joining me today is Patrick Mason. Hey, Pat.
Howdy, Jeff.
And Thomas Salerno. Hey, Thomas.
Hello, Jeff.
And be sure to follow The Secrets of Movies and TV on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or any podcast directory or app. And you can find us on social media at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or on Twitter, where we are at SQPN, or on Instagram, where we are at StarQuest Network. So today we will be reviewing the second season of Foundation on Apple TV. You may remember we reviewed season 1 about a year ago, and season 3 is currently in production. So just a brief recap of season 1 before we get into a long recap of season 2 and then discuss the show. So in season 1's finale, Harry Seldon's Foundation successfully hid from Imperial forces on Terminus by making the Empire think all life was wiped out. Salvor had gone to find her mother Gale, and Gale, who had been on a ship, lands on her home planet 240 years later and finds Salvor in a pod. And then starting the season, Gale, Salvor, and a clone version of Harry Seldon from the Prime Radiant device leave Gale's planet. In the last 240 years, a pseudo-religion from the Foundation, using powerful technology, has spread across the outer reaches of the Empire. Harry says they need to establish a second Foundation based on mental abilities, as they are fearing a coming threat. They are brought to a planet of refuge for telepaths who are run by a telepath who controls all of them. She kills Harry Seldon, or so they think, as she wanted to move her consciousness to Gale's body, but Harry's mind survived inside of Gale's. Unfortunately, Salvor was killed by the telepath, and Gale and Harry go into cryosleep to face the future threat watched over by this fledgling second Foundation. Meanwhile, the current ruling emperor, Brother Day, is going to wed a queen to end the genetic dynasty. The clones Dawn and Day worry about their future in this end of the genetic dynasty and their place in it. Turns out Day was involved in the assassination of the queen's family, and she seeks to have children with Dawn instead. The android Demerzel recruits a former general who's been imprisoned on a penal colony to investigate the growing threat of the Foundation to the emperor's rule. In investigating this, he meets the thief Hober Mallow, who obtains a whisper ship from some of the Church of Terminus missionaries, which does not require a spacer to navigate the jump. Hober meets with spacers who are dependent on a drug given by the Empire, and they decide to rebel when he offers an alternative. And then after Hober arrives on Trantor during the execution ceremony of some missionaries, he saves them, and then having learned Terminus was not destroyed in the previous season, Day decides to attack Terminus and goes there with his fleet. The world of Terminus is destroyed, but Hober and the Spacers lead the fleet to be destroyed as well. General Rios also sends Day out an airlock to die. And then back on Trantor, Demerzel decants the clones of all 3 clans at once, which has never been done before. And a version of Harry Seldon, along with citizens of Terminus, are revived via cloning from the device that had been previously on Terminus. Sereth and Dawn escape to live free or maybe be a future threat to the Empire. And then flashing forward 152 years later, the Mule, which is the threat sensed by Gale, becomes aware of her presence. All right, so that was about as short as I can make that summary of that season. So
yeah, there is a lot going on here in 10 hours of television. Yeah.
So before we discuss some of the plot points, what were y'all's overall impressions of the season?
I liked it. Very interesting, as the previous season was. There were some parts where I liked some of the storylines better. I was interested in a lot of the kind of cloak and dagger stuff surrounding Day's impending marriage, and then Dusk trying to find out that his memories are being manipulated, and the discovery of Demerzel's past and all that stuff. Yeah, the telepath storyline didn't really do much for me, for whatever reason. But I really liked a lot of the characters in the show. I thought the acting was great. I like the big kind of massive sci-fi structures and planets we get to see. It was a very immersive show overall, as I think I said about last season. I've only read the first book, so I know that, but I do know that this show basically has very, very little to do with with the rest of the books. Maybe we could talk about that. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed it. And the ending makes me very interested to find out what's next.
Awesome. What about you, Pat?
I would say generally I did enjoy it. It's so in comparison to the books, this takes about, I would say, 2 or 3 of the crises that occur in the books after the initial crises, and jam them all together as one sort of thing. Because you have the religion coming about, and it was nice to see that they went that route. Like that whole religion thing, that was pretty actually spot on. At least you don't get a whole lot of detail about it in the books. You just know that there's kind of a religion, and then the fact that they come to a point where they can no longer spread the religion, like no other planets really want anything to do with their kind of technological religion, but they are interested in the trading aspect of it. They want the gadgets and stuff. And that's 2 sets of the move from the religion to being more of a trading society is one of the big crises that occurs. And then there's another one that occurs with the kind of broader alliance that you see at play here with the 7+1 planets. And then you have the crises with the Empire noticing them and going to war. And in the books, there's not a whole lot of detail about that. You get the general, who's a very charismatic and well-liked general, and he forms the enclosure and everything. And so that was pretty much taken. And him and the Emperor are more or less at odds in the books as well, but it's not nearly as visceral, literally coming down to a fist fight in the last episode. So from that perspective, it was neat to watch them weave in the original storylines in the books. Everything to do with the Second Foundation is obviously completely different. They did that from the get-go. It does bring up some questions about what they're going to do with Harry Seldon's home planet, because that was the original place for the Second Foundation, and I am very curious to see if that's where they end up doing the Third Foundation, which I think in the books is called Gaia, but it's a kind of a hidden planet around a dark star, and that's what his home planet was from the first that we saw in the first season. So I'm interested to see that. I am very happy they brought the mule in, warlike than he was in the books, at least.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's just this overarching controlling mental force, and so there's not like a lot of battle that goes on around him because he just makes whatever he wants happens, and so there's not a lot. It's just he's in charge now, the deal. And so I'm interested to see how that plays out in the books, and because there's not really a real conflict, he just eventually dies. They move on.
That would be very anticlimactic.
Yeah, right.
To do with they say next season, he just died off screen. Yeah. You don't get to see him again.
Yeah, he dies and he has no children because he's a mule. And
is that what that means? Interesting.
Yeah. And so it's neat to see that stuff. All of the stuff with the Emperor. It was fun when they were trying to figure out who Demerzel was. The rest of it was not nearly as fun as all the Emperor stuff in the first season. I thought the intrigues and stuff that were happening in the first season were actually a lot more fun. The Queen stuff was, I don't know, it was interesting. It just felt, for like spy versus spy stuff, it all felt very heavy-handed. So that was less fun for me. But yeah, that's overall, I enjoyed it. And again, sweeping giant sci-fi stuff is always fun.
Yeah. And for me, I enjoyed this. I enjoyed it as well. It was easier to follow because we're not jumping around 3 different time periods. And it's the same Cleon, it's the same Brother Day, the whole series. It's the same Brother Dawn, or the whole season. It's the same Brother Dusk. So there's not like trying to figure out, are you Cleon the 14th or the 16th or the 7th? You know who everybody is.
Do we know who they were in relation to the ones in the end of the first season?
It's been... Let's see, I can pull it up. It's been 140 something year or 240 years. So I think it's been at least two rounds of Cleons. Because in season, let me see. Trying to do math on the fly.
Cleon last?
Not my.
Yeah, I thought the Emperors had like extended lifespans, and especially because like towards the end, when Demerzel is talking to Day, like when she mentions how when you were a kid, I didn't raise you right. And I'm like, oh yeah, the little boy from last season.
So it was Cleon the 17th was Brother Day. In season 1, it looks like Brother Day, for the main part of that season, Brother Day was, again, there was multiple Brother Days in season, so it's hard to keep track. But I think in season 1, it was the 12th and 13th were the 2 Brother Days. So we're now 4 days later, for lack of a better phrase. But yeah, not having to keep track of multiple time jumps was interesting. I liked some of that in the first season, but it made it a little bit easier to follow here. But yeah, overall it was good. I would agree that the palace intrigue stuff was maybe not as interesting as the other stuff going on. And I'm a sucker for anything big, sci-fi, epic, and they shows on Apple TV. Like, I know there's a lot of debate and a lot of stuff going on in like the visual effects world, but Apple TV, their effects have always looked really good in these shows. I think we talked about when we did Monarch and when we've done the other seasons of Foundation. I don't have any complaints about the vision. And they're not spending the Marvel money or anything like that. But the big space battle at the end was awesome. Seeing these cool ships flying around and the big warship from the first season trying to defend Terminus and all that. But yeah, overall, I really like the season. And yeah, curious to see what they do with the mule, because it's been forever since I've read the books. It's at least 10 years, probably like 13 or 14 years. But from what I remember, he was like, people don't know he's the mule, and he's just, some of the characters meet him and they're like, oh, there's this crazy guy. And I think he's like physically, I think he looks like a clown, has some
the first
features
time
that are
shows
like
up.
Messed up, and people don't know who he is, and then they find out, oh, this is actually this guy who's going to destroy everything because he's a super high powered telepath.
Yeah, he shows up literally as a clown, a jester, in the first time.
Oh no.
And he basically stages getting rescued by the Foundation so he can go to Terminus.
Yeah, because there's part of in the books, one of the crises is the Empire falling, because that's what the Foundation was set up for, was to mitigate some of the aspects of the falling Empire. Because when it falls, there's going to be a dark age. But Harry Seldon's whole thing is, by building this, because he starts out as a galactic encyclopedia, can shorten this dark age. But it's really, he's setting up the Foundation, which will, like you said, Pat later sets up Gaia, which is like again, from what I remember, it's been a while, but it sets up this like hive mind of all humanity thing. It's like the end goal of all of that.
They never get there in the Foundation series. Yeah. I can't remember if he ever wrote anything past the Foundation series.
I don't think so, because I think the last book is when they establish that moving forward, and it's set up like that's what's going to happen. But I don't think anything ever came out after that.
It's interesting, this whole concept of trying to first predict and then control future events. And as I was watching in this season, it really struck me the arrogance of that idea that it's, we need to prevent this dark age. We need to save human civilization in a form that we can recognize. And I'm like, why? In other words, this is not in your wheelhouse. Like, this is not up to your pay grade. Like, this sort of controlling history, this idea that, so humans have this galactic-wide empire and they can do this giant space engineering, basically creating artificial rings around planets and having hyperdrive and all that stuff. Humans have gotten to the point in this universe where they think they can do anything, including determine the future course of history. And I'm just like, the sheer arrogance of that, it's almost like you want to just let it happen. Let them take their lumps, and because there's no question in this of them trusting to Providence or something to take care of it. They want to control everything. I just thought that was, it's an interesting philosophical question that I'm wondering if they'll wrestle with in the future. Should we really be doing this?
I think that was actually a lot of the main thrust of this season, was trying to answer that question.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the relationship-oriented material we see brings up the notion of these kind of things can only happen because we live in at least a semi-just society, right? Like, the Emperor's peace, while at the top it may not be very peaceful, for most galactic citizens, it is. It provides a way for them to live their lives out and to follow their faith, and to, as we saw in the first season. Whereas the conversation you see the general have about being in the Anarch regions and in what's going on the fringes of the empire and how it just turns into this hellscape where the rulers are, I think he says, rapists, and the poor are slaves, right? And so it puts forward this idea that if we just let it all tumble down, the suffering that's going to be caused by that is so overwhelming that it's worthwhile to keep it. And I think there's a lot of conversations Seldon has with other people where he's trying to sell that. Because there's always this, especially with Gale, there's always this fight back about what about my life and what about the individual lives. And Harry's all, yes, we have to balance that against 1 trillion people here. Again, the suffering that would be caused if the empire falls. And what is that worth and how does that play out? You're right. There's an enormous amount of hubris built into all that.
Right.
And I do love that scene where the Seldon on Terminus figures out he's the control group. And he just swears. He's, I can't believe I'm the control.
Yeah. And what you mentioned, Pat, is interesting because that rationale for the empire expanding into these other regions where there's chaos and disorder and people suffering is essentially the Roman modus operandi, right? That's how they justify imperialism to themselves. We're civilizing these people. We're bringing civilization. And like you said, we're at the top, everybody's corrupt and awful. And half the Roman emperors are either crazy or just straight up evil. Yeah, for the majority of people living in the empire, maybe it's not so bad, but it's tell that to the Germanic farmer who just wants to be left alone. And then the empire comes in, we bring civilization. And he's just leave me alone, man. It's so, and I think I remember reading somewhere that Asimov, Isaac Asimov, who wrote the books, was inspired by reading that giant book, Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire by Gibbons. So it makes sense that Roman history is just baked in to Foundation from the very beginning. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and part of their control, part of the way the Empire kind of controls is through their technology and through their reliance on the spacers, because the way the technology works, the way their FTL works is human minds can't comprehend what happens during a jump, and the jumps are instantaneous. You jump one place to the other, so like Dune, like space folding there, but the human mind can't comprehend it and so they have to basically put every person into their cryo sleep. And the spacers have a special, from what I understand they have technology that slows down their mental functions so that they aren't just overwhelmed by this. And the spacers are they're long, spindly, tall people that have cybernetics in their faces and lights, and their eyes are lighting up and stuff. And so they can navigate the jumps and not have to go to cryosleep and whatnot. But they rely on a chemical, basically it's Tetracell White from Star Trek DS9.
I was thinking that, yeah.
And the Dominion to keep them in check. But Terminus has created what they call whisper ships, which are basically they can mitigate the effects of that on a human, so they don't need the spacers anymore. And the guy Hober Mallow, he was in I need to reread these books because it's been so long, but these are all, Pat, you may remember, but I believe he's a character from the books.
If I remember right, he's one of the traders who ends up. Okay. So he goes to a planet and they boycott him being there because of the religion aspect, and he convinces them to take on the Foundation's trading materials. Okay. And then he ends up getting the planet to submit to the Foundation by then later on withholding those materials. And the people on the planet are like, no, we need those.
Yeah, so they get they get these ships, and the Foundation has alchemy, apparently, because when Cleon lands on Terminus and they're like, show me this technology, because he's like reasserting his control, and they're like, we can convert lead into gold, and Cleon's just, I don't care, I'm going to wipe all you out anyway. So, yeah, it's interesting setting up that, because like I said, the spacers, they decide to rebel because they don't need this, or they can get this chemical. I think they say the Foundation can make it, or like they have the technology to make it so that they're no longer bound to the Empire. And that leads to the spacers rebelling and leading all these all these ships being jumped to basically like crash into each other in jump space and blow up, so that mitigates the Empire's military threat. And I'm assuming they have other fleets and probably millions of other ships and stuff, but at least this was the Emperor's fleet and like the head of probably the biggest, baddest ship they had that they blew up. So it'll be interesting to see the fallout from that, because it sounds like this next season will be the kind of the really decline of the Empire, especially if the Mule's going to be a character. Like we could see a big kind of civil war or big war type of thing going on.
Yeah, in the books, you don't have a destruction of the fleet. It just, the infighting at the top gets so severe that the Empire is more or less struggles to combat any foe, because one general wants to go out and fight, and then the Emperor sees him as a threat, so he stops him. But then and it just becomes this infighting thing, and the Empire can't actually put up a fight anymore because of it. So it's a very different turn having a major fleet wiped out all of a sudden. So I will be very interested to see what they do. But yeah, it does seem to strike me as like the next season is going to be the fall of the Empire and the rise of the Mule.
Yeah, because we see the Mule in the Gale has a vision in the Prime Radiant, which is, I'm guessing, it's just like a quantum computer type of thing, or some vague sci-fi MacGuffin that, you know, it's the thing that Harry Seldon that has used to predict the future up till now, but it also has like cloning faculties somehow. I don't know, yeah. But
I don't actually think those were clones at the end. I don't know.
I'm talking about, that wasn't the Prime Radiant. I'm talking about when Harry Seldon when the Harry that was with Gale. Because like his body was killed and his mind went into Gale, and then a version emerged from the Prime Radiant and took the mind back, is the way I understood that.
I don't know.
And then how did he get that first organic body? He went into that cave, and when he was on the statue, he had an organic body.
That's a big question mark. That's something we don't understand yet.
Yeah.
Because
that was just supposed to be like a mine. Was there secret cloning technology in there?
Wasn't it the crazy leader of the Mentats? They're not Mentats.
The Mentalics.
Mentalics. Sorry, wrong sci-fi. The Mentalics. Wasn't it her? Didn't she give the body to Seldon? That's the impression I got.
Yeah, that's possible. I hadn't thought about that. That would be like the body that he got.
After going to the cave?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I guess there's a lot going on this season that my summary didn't touch on.
I thought it was interesting with the reveal of Demerzel's past, and they touch a little bit on the robot wars, and which are an allusion to Asimov's other series, the robot series, which is intertwined with Foundation. But it occurred to me as the series wraps, I'm like, in Demerzel, the robots won.
Yeah.
Because now there's a robot controlling all of human society. The robots won.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit beforehand, but that's quite a bit different from the book, because she's supposed to be the same character as Daniel Oliva, who, if you've read the robot books, he's the robot that teams up with a human like detective and eventually goes off and adventures off Earth and whatnot. But Daniel Olivas, he becomes the guiding hand of humanity through the Empire and the Foundation. He does it all over thousands and thousands of years, but he's not one that will, murder people and, have a relationship with somebody and things like that. So I want to see what y'all thought of that, because we start the season with Cleon and with Brother Day having a relationship with Demerzel, and then later.
That's a diplomatic way of putting it.
But then
it's a family show, though.
But then when you see it in the past, because you see the flashbacks of Cleon the First and how as a kid, he found Demerzel in a stasis chamber, and she was trapped but awake, so she asked for help, and he helped her. And Cleon the First, through all the way from even before the Brother Dawn age. Like, you see him as a little boy and then growing up through Brother Dawn and all the way to dusk, and how he has this relationship with Demerzel. So I was curious what y'all thought of just the flashback overall, because I thought it was really cool to see the progression of how this got all set up, that he freed her. They come up with the cloning idea, but he also changes her rules to allow her to kill, but not to kill him.
Yeah, he overrides the first law of robotics.
Yeah.
From the robot books, yeah. But then makes her completely subservient. I liked the discussion about freedom because there's this idea, which I think is true, that some people think the more power they can accumulate, the more free they'll be. But in some sense, they actually become more restricted. You actually become a slave to power. And so Cleon feels, even though he's at the top, he's the emperor, he feels he doesn't have any power because he can't really do what he wants. He just has to be the emperor. And he has to listen. He talks about being like chained to the throne and how he has all these advisors and how I guess he would rather just not be emperor, but that's not what's expected of him. So he's a slave to this power that he has. And he gives freedom in the sense of freedom from being in prison and the ability to move around and walk, but at the price of her free will, which is essentially either maybe not taken away fully, but definitely curtailed. So there's a lot of interesting stuff there about agency and free will and how sometimes what we think of as freedom is actually slavery. I just thought there's some interesting philosophical stuff there.
I liked how after he inputs the new like hardware that I guess overrides software in the back of her neck, there's a point where he asks her if she loves him, and she says yes. And he's, "Oh, I should have asked you that before I programmed you to love me."
Uh-huh.
And there's a scene where Dawn, as he's escaping with the queen, mirrors that, where he says, "I would like to think that you would want us to be happy if you could. And so I'm going to just assume that's how it is." And I thought it was very interesting watching this play out with Timbercell and understanding her role, and not just like what she is as the robot, but also like how like hated she has for that constraint on her for doing what she's doing, but being unable to break out of it at the same time.
Yeah, because we touched on it, but in this season, Cleon, because all the Cleons, like we said, this is Cleon 17, whose brother Day, he's up until now, he's had relationships or at various stages, but never like a marriage and never going to have a child. It's all going to be, his success will be a clone, will be his younger clone self. So he decides to break that tradition and marry this queen of this planet or this group of planets. And it turns out he actually killed her family. So not a great start to that relationship. And she starts trying to influence Brother Dawn, because Dawn and Dusk both start with, what's our place if if he has a genetic offspring that's not one of us, what is our place? And Dusk was on the chopping block anyway, because the Dusks are allowed to live a certain length of time before they're executed, basically disintegrated. So
yeah,
so you see that intrigue with Dusk and Dawn trying to figure out what's our place, what's going to be next. And I'm curious to see, because the queen starts talking to Dawn about, I'll have your child instead, because in trying to influence him that way. But then they go off together at the end. So I was wondering, do y'all think this Dawn will be the seed? Dawn and Queen will be the seed of an opposition to the Cleonic dynasty. Maybe even the mule is their descendant, or I don't know if y'all had any thoughts or speculation on that.
I think it's just as likely they just go off into the sunset and lay low. That's what I would do if I was there.
Yeah. It seemed like that was the path they were going to take. It would be really interesting if the mule ends up being their kid. And it's interesting, the brother Day we get is fairly unhinged compared to the ones beforehand.
I think that's part of, because they started last season, they were saying like the genetic material is no longer, there's flaws in it. So I think we're seeing that maybe that's due to some of that degradation of that material, but then also influence from others and from these other factions. Because these factions who introduced this genetic flaw that they tried to capture they did capture Brother Dawn last season, and they were replacing him with a copy so that he could be the next emperor. So maybe it could be something like that, because I think that in the first season they said that the source material is no longer perfect, or it's no longer, there's something about it's degrading, or it won't make perfect copies anymore.
They hinted there never were any perfect genetic copies.
Yeah.
And then you find out in this season that somebody's been tampering with their memories the whole time. Because Cleon the First is, and I can't remember what memory packets. It's like he has 213 and the rest of them are at like 80 something. You're like, wow, less than half. So I'm wondering if it's Demerzel who's doing the tampering, because you find out like she's running so many different schemes in the background. Like she ran all the schemes to kill off the Cloud Dominion's royal family, all but the one girl. And then at the same time is running a scheme to fake kill Cleon so she can blame that girl so she can break up the wedding.
Yeah, like I said, the robots won because they now have a robot in charge of everything. And about that memory thing, I was thinking just now about the whole memory audit thing. And now, okay, I'm not like a neurologist or anything like that, but I'm like, I don't think memory works that way. I don't think your brain actually stores every single second of stuff that you've seen as like a tape recorder. I really don't think that's how memory works. Is it? No. I always thought that like your brain just doesn't remember certain things or like just dumps like unnecessary information. Like the fact that they could take a device and like scan every single second of your waking memory for something seemed preposterous, but I accepted it for it's sci-fi, whatever. But I was like, does memory really work like that?
Yeah, I don't think it does. Yeah, because if it did, I would remember where I lose things a lot better than I do.
Obviously in your conscious memory, but I don't even think your unconscious like stores every single second of like stuff that you've seen. But,
yeah. And then we haven't, just to touch on this other part, we haven't really talked about the Mentalics, this kind of proto foundation, the second foundation, because the second foundation is based on mental abilities to guide the first foundation. So what did y'all think of that storyline? It was what Gale and that Harry and Salvor were doing, was they eventually find this planet who's a refuge of these Mentalics. And like people like this are treated pretty horribly. Like they're usually killed off, or if you're identified as having these abilities, like they're going to come kill your family and try to kill you too. And so there's this refuge of all these people. And you think they're this like ideal commune type of thing, but then you find out that they're all controlled by this one mind, and she's trying to, trying to take someone else's body to continue on her consciousness. And she's trying to do like a Palpatine type of thing of. Yeah,
I was going to say that.
It turns out they're all being run by I keep wanting to call them Mentats.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
Mentalics. She's being run by the whole commune's being run by the Mentalic version of Hitler. People who aren't us, they don't count. We can kill them. It's okay. Wait a minute. We don't kill our own kind, Gale. And I'm like, you're human. That's your kind.
That was an interesting storyline because at one point you think Harry Seldon is killed because they're on this planet and Gale's kind of buying into them a little bit. And Salvor, of course, basically having been a cop from before, is suspicious of it all. And eventually she finds that Harry's drowned body and then you think he's dead completely and they're trying to get off this planet. But then later you find out that Harry's mind had taken refuge in Gale's mind and had to hide by counting prime numbers to avoid being detected, and then is resurrected through the prime radiant somehow, or however he's brought back.
He never dies.
Oh, he doesn't?
No,
I thought he died.
No, Gale takes over the mind of one of the captors, forces that guy to unlock his whatever bindings, and then makes him lock himself up. And then basically when Salvo shows up, she mirages him to look like Harry. So Harry never died. Okay. Climbs up the thing, and then they're trying to live out their day in the same paces so that the other people can't tell that Gale's actually like communing with a guy who's not supposed to be there anymore.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, there's a lot going on in this show.
Yeah, so. As a storyline that was not presented as a Cloak and Dagger storyline, it turned out to be a way better Cloak and Dagger storyline than the one that was presented that way. The one that happens in the palace is, this one was actually like we got to the end and Harry comes out with that lead pipe, which is amazing that you're going to beat down a Mentalic with a lead pipe.
Yeah. Goes.
Yeah, and he win, and they win, and you're like, all right, I didn't see that coming. It came out of full-blown left field for me.
Yeah, well, I guess I had to do something like that, given the fact that they have the guts to fake kill Harry again. Or, I guess he was really killed last time, like last season. And he came back in a new, like his consciousness was cloned and came back in a new body. But still, it's Harry dead there, and you're like, he's come back before. You know, it's like he's like a comic book character in that sense. It's like, oh no, Superman is dead, and you're just like, no, just wait 6 months, and they'll bring him back in like the next cycle of issues.
And you gotta wonder, like, how many more of him are out there? Because they've established that the Prime Radiant device is a superposition quantum item, which means that there could be more than two.
They say, oh, that means it's at two places at once. And I was like, no, doesn't that mean it could be in like
everywhere places at once? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you see at the end that I can't remember if it was called the Ark or the Cradle or whatever it was in season 1 that the clone Harry Seldon came out of, like the vault. There you go. Yeah, the Foundation, the first Foundation, they're all cloned out of that because there's a character, Brother Polly, who's a female. I don't know. That threw me off the whole show of like Brother Polly and identifies
as female. Yeah, she calls herself brother. That
was part of the religion. They called all of them brothers.
Yeah.
So that was
all
just
of them brother.
Yeah, that just threw me.
That was a title.
But her name was Brother Constant, and Polly was the other one. But Brother Constant at
Polly
the end
was the drunkard.
Yeah, because she's ejected she had started a relationship with Hober Mallow. And she's ejected from like a life pod from the flagship of the Empire of Cleon, where everything was going down. And she finds the vault, and all these people are coming back. So there's like the seeds of that Foundation already that will come back again. So
I didn't think they were clones. I assumed that the vault picked them up as the planet was being destroyed.
But yeah,
because it's like the TARDIS, right? Because it's way bigger on the inside.
Maybe I'm just everyone's clones in this, so maybe that's just what my mind went to.
And there are a lot
clones
of clones
all the way down. Yeah. But some of the funniest stuff was when they go into the vault for the first time. What's his name? Hobart and the mayor of the town and like the two monks. And when they go in only a few seconds after him, but for him it's been like 3 days. And he's like, "Do you have food?" And he starts eating all his food, and he's like, and they're like, let's look around. And he's, "Don't go over there. I took a dump." And it was like, I just burst out laughing. That was hysterical. And it came out of nowhere. I liked him. I liked Hobart. He was funny. And I like how at the end, like, he describes himself like as a cynical nihilist, but he's still a nice guy.
Yeah, he's your Han Solo thief with a heart of gold kind of guy, because he's introduced. Yeah, he says he has this device to this one planet where you can like you can swap places. It's like a swap places type of thing. Yeah, and so he's, I'll sell it to you, but then he tricks the people he was going to sell it to because he's about to be executed. But then he swaps with the king of that, or the leader of that planet, and the leader is executed, and he flies off and gets away. So then he later has that relationship with Brother Constant, and because Cleon's throwing her out the airlock at the end, but he uses that device to swap them. So when my summary I said the general threw him out, but I guess it was really Cleon threw himself out is what I.
Yeah, kind of, because he puts the general in the airlock and then hits the button, and the general castles with him. And Cleon floats out.
Yeah. Yeah. So trying to think of what other plot lines we have. We talked a little bit about Terminus, their kind of level of technology it's become this pseudo-religion spreading to the outer reaches because it's the outer reaches are the areas the Empire has neglected for a while. and having...
This is definitely like a secular humanist's idea of what religion is, all this smoke and mirrors stuff. And it's, oh, we can trick these hayseed peasants into believing in our religion by just, they're not like, I'm like, no real religion works like that. They're more like Simon Magus than actual apostles, like preaching stuff. Ooh, wow, look at our magic tricks. I'm like, yeah, no real religion would be successful doing that.
And to its credit, it's not. He gets to a point where it's not. It's
right.
I love when Cleon lands and he points at the building and he's, oh, that's a temple. And I'm like, no, that's a manufacturing facility where the scientists do stuff. But I did enjoy that sort of that they did the progression, and that Hober was a former cleric that never really believed. Yeah. And Paulie was a semi-true believer, but he was like, I'm really in it for the science.
He says that interesting thing about, like, he can't have faith because of because of the knowledge that he has, where, like, he's seen it for real, so he can't have faith like the people who never saw Seldon before and who just believed in him. I thought that was interesting, but I don't think that's right, because obviously the first generation of Christians, like the apostles, had faith despite the fact that they had seen and touched Jesus in real life. So I don't think faith and experiential knowledge are mutually exclusive.
Now, I will say, though, there is that one passage where we have Jesus talking about how blessed the people who will believe without seeing.
But have not seen. Yeah. Oh, you're right. Yeah. Okay. Blessed are they. And what's his name? The older drunk guy.
Brother Paulie.
He basically says that Brother Constant is blessed because she has not seen and yet believed. So yeah, I guess that's another way to look at that too.
But yeah, they're basically eventually make their way to, I was going to say Coruscant, but it's not Coruscant, it's Trantor. Which we talked about last time was based on Trantor.
Oh, it's Coruscant.
But they're eventually captured by because Cleon starts to hear they bring Rios back because they start hearing whispers and start hearing rumors of this foundation, this religion, and they got to go check it out. And they're going to send this disgraced general out to do it. And eventually, the Paulie and Constant are captured and brought to Trantor and about to be executed because Cleon thought they were destroyed, but the Terminus is still around and Foundation's still active. So he's going to do that as a example of defying the Empire. But then that's when Hober Mallows, the Whisper ship, which he stole from them, and he brings it back and saves them. We're just in time. And leads to the little bit of relationship between Hober and Constant. And they also have this this giant dog monster thing that's pretty cool. What's his name? Becky or Becky, yeah.
It sort of showcases the whole state secret technology as being a limiting factor. Right. So, we've created the spacers and we have them controlled with this drug. So we don't need to move forward with creating better ways to do jump or easier ways to do jump technology. And the Emperor gets a personal aura, but nobody else does. These little state secret technology pieces, whereas the Foundation is, we're just going to plunge forward and do whatever we want. And they end up with better technology in the end, right? They're able to jump the Whisper ship right onto practically into the palace and then jump out without being harassed by the Empire. And I think it also sets the stage for sort of both the religion and the trade stuff, because you have this technology. It looks like magic because the Empire has kept it all to themselves without giving it out to everybody this is a state secret, or as a protective measure that comes back to bite them, because now the Foundation can arm and give the Outer Rim planets really cool stuff that they wouldn't get from the Empire, and better stuff. And so I think it sets up why it's going to set up why so many planets, they don't just fall into anarchy and then the Foundation picks them up. It's more like they turn sides. And you have, right now, it's like picking up the outer edges, but because of this sort of showcase of technological prowess, the Foundation is now at the point where it can be like, no, come to us. We're the better empire, basically.
Yeah. And then, that just to go to the final battle, I just thought that was just so cool. I want to rewatch that episode because like I said, you don't see a lot of like on TV big space battles like this. It's usually in the movies, but this looked like movie quality to me. And the ships that the Empire's flying are pretty cool. They're like these wings that can rotate around, and then they have this like giant energy weapon on their main ship that they're blasting the other giant ship with. And yeah, just a lot of fun seeing spaceships shooting at each other, which is very different than the books, because in the books, it's not about the combat or anything at all. It's more of like the philosophical ideas, but I like that I like that we're getting that big sci-fi stuff in this.
I know we haven't talked about him a lot, but a lot of his conversations with some of the other characters, they have a lot of philosophy in them about the concept of following orders, even though like you might not want to, or it would cause you personal harm or maybe cause harm. On the other side of it, it's going to save other people. And the idea, like, if I don't pull the trigger, then the next guy's going to pull the trigger. And so maybe I can do it in a way that's not as bad. It's a lot of his conversations are an interesting look into what happens when you're a competent and decent human being under leadership that's neither of those things. But with the knowledge that if things fall apart, it will get bad. And how bad does it have to get at my level before I'm okay with making it bad at all of the levels? Because he's very much committed to this idea, if the Empire falls, like, it's going to be hellish and humanity may just wipe itself out. And so some of the orders and the actions he takes, he does it not because he thinks I have to do this in order to maintain the Empire. And because if I don't do it, somebody else is going to do it. So
the lesser of two evils. Yeah.
While I wasn't a huge fan of the relationship stuff all about the general and some of the other characters, it was like, oh, good. All of the stable relationships are those types of relationships. Yeah, thanks for planting your boot on my head. Woo. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the conversations he has are actually they're very interesting philosophical conversations if you can get past that sheen.
Yeah, at one point, what is said to him something that you won't recognize atrocities until you've already committed them? At one point, that line stood out to me. I was like, oh, yeah. And then when they visit that one guy's house on that desert planet, and his partner is given the book. I think it's one of the Hindu mythological cycles, but it's about the two generals arguing about the righteousness of war and something. I'm like, Simba!
Yeah, and then he has a final kind of conversation with Hober, because they're on the flagship. They're just waiting for the end, and they're sharing this old bottle of wine, and they're like trying to. It was funny. They were like trying to say, "Oh, this wine, it's so good. It tastes like this. It tastes like that," and then they're like, "It's crap. Like it went
tastes
bad.
Terrible. It corked."
Yeah, because that bottle was another thing Hober had stolen earlier in or at the beginning when you see him. Kind of the last note I have here, I know we talked about the mule somewhat, but yeah, it sounds like he's going to be another antagonist next season, because this season we have Cleon, and then we had I think her name was Tellum, the Mentalic cult leader lady who was taking over people's bodies. So I think next season it'll probably be, because Harry and Gale are going to be in cryo sleep and watched over by these Mentalics, and they're going to wake up every so often to provide guidance to the people and whatnot. And then I'm assuming they'll wake up 142 years later to confront the mule. So I don't know. It sounds like the next season, there might be at least one more season after this, the way they're setting up the story, if they do the mule. And I don't know how much beyond that, because after the mule, there's not really, from what I remember, there's not really a main antagonist in the books. They just are more like explore philosophical ideas and things like that. So I don't know what will come after that. But any other thoughts on the mule, or any speculation on what that will be in the next season?
I'm interested if So is the Empire really in the process of coming apart at that point, or is it just that the mule is causing chaos in the outer reaches? That's my only question. I don't know. I guess
it'll
we'll
be
see.
some of both, probably.
Yeah. There's two very different things they're doing with him. And the first is that if he shows up depending on where the Empire is at the time, he's showing up really early. Because in the books, the Empire is pretty much gone by the time he pops up. The Foundation is like the most populous ruling force in the galaxy at that point. And the other thing is, he's been announced, right? Gale has seen him. That was not in the books. Like, he just shows up out of nowhere. No one knows where he comes from. They finally figure it out that he's actually from Gaia in the other books. And that's what, after the Mule, the three books that come after that are all like one storyline following one group of characters on a quest that ends up coming back to the robot. So I'll be interested to see if that ends up still being Demerzel. And that's what's really curious in my mind, is what she does. What does her programming allow her to do once the Empire's fallen? Like, if the Cleonic dynasty is gone and there's no way to bring it back, is she then given free reign, free will? And then what does that look like, given that her laws of robotics have been tampered with?
Yeah, I'm assuming Cleon will be in the show until the end, because they've set that up as he's kind of the main antagonist, and you have a season-long antagonist as well. So I'm assuming Cleon will be there till the end, and maybe the final shot of the show is her like overcoming her programming and killing him or something. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And yeah, something I discovered right before we recorded that I just thought it'll be funny for us. It may not be funny for other people, but did y'all ever look up who the Mule is played by or what he's been in before? So he plays Bjorn in the Hobbit movies.
Oh, I can see it now. Even he had a lot of prosthetic and makeup in the Hobbit movies, but his voice was familiar. And I was like, who is this guy? And that makes so much sense now that you say it.
Yeah, so I thought it'd be funny for those. So for more info on that, listen to The Secrets of Middle-earth.
When we eventually get to breaking down all three Hobbit.
But any final thoughts on Season 2 of Foundation?
No, just excited for next season. I'm sure it will take forever to get here because of production delays and probably the insane amount of effects work that goes into a show like this. But yeah, I'm patient. Maybe in the meantime, I'll read the rest of the books.
I think coming to me, the only thing that we didn't touch on was the conversations about hope that were sprinkled through, mostly between Brother Constant and Hober Mallow, and her kind of trying to convince him to realize he's actually a very hopeful person, because nobody keeps a bottle of wine waiting on a better thing, right? Unless they're actually hopeful the better thing will happen, which is funny. He ends up drinking it right before his ship's going to blow up. But in the same token, the better thing has happened, right? He has successfully helped guide the Foundation through that crisis, and also set a whole bunch of modified humans free, which is an interesting sort of thing with the spacers. So that was another conversation I enjoyed. And just in general, like, the conversations, I think, despite who they're coming from and who they're between, a lot of times are really good in this show. I never find one where I'm like, okay, I never have the Attack of the Clone moments where I'm skipping this scene, click. I don't need to hear about how sand is coarse and it gets everywhere. I already know that.
Yeah, and I think for me, the only other thing is we didn't really talk about, but Salvor will no longer have Salvor, at least this version, but cloning. So
yeah,
so
that made me mad. That made me legitimately angry, because I really like her character. Like, out of all the characters, some of them are likable, some of them are not, but I really like Salvo. And watching Harry Seldon die, I was like, whatever. But watching her die, I was like, no, come on.
Yeah. And that ties into the hope theme, because now they're hopeful that the future isn't rigidly set in stone because of Salvor's death, because in her vision, Gale had seen Salvor die in combat hundreds of years in the future. So, but again, with cloning, maybe that could still happen. So And we'll see.
Yeah, it's a clever way in the show because you can keep the same character, the same actors in the show, and you don't have to recast, and you already have an idea of who these people are. So it's an interesting use of that. You have some characters who are the same and they just pass time through cryosleep or whatever, and then you have some who are just remade through cloning, and we'll have a new set of Cleons that are out now, and I guess by that time it'll be like Cleon the 20th probably or something like that.
And then it's got to be a lot of fun for the actor. They get to play different versions of the same character. This one's a little crazier than the last one. This one's a lot crazier than the last one.
I think that is it for this episode and covering season 2 of Foundation. So we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make this show possible, including Zach W., Gyro C., Adam F., Kyle J., and Matthew B. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give help us to continue to create the secrets of movies and TV shows and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them at sqpn.com/give. So now we'd love to hear from you. What did you think of season 2 of Foundation? You can let us know at sqpn.com, on our Facebook page or on Twitter, or send an email to secrets@sqpn.com, or visit our channel on the StarQuest Discord server at sqpn.com/discord. So until then, thank you, Patrick Mason, for sharing the secrets of Foundation.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me on.
And thank you, Thomas Salerno.
Thank you, Jeff. This was great.
And once again, I'm Jeff Haecker. Thank you for listening to the secrets of movies and TV on StarQuest.
Join a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to go on pilgrimage to the mysterious shrines and sites of Italy in the Jubilee year 2025 with Jimmy Aiken and me, Dom Bettinelli. Go with us on a 12-day, all-inclusive tour that gives you incredible access to Jimmy's insights in Rome, Assisi, Orvieto, Monte Cassino, San Giovanni Rotondo, the Grotto of St. Michael, and more. We're also planning special activities like recording on location for future episodes of Mysterious World and an in-person Weird Questions episode just for pilgrims. Space is limited and filling up, so be sure to find out more. Visit mysterious.fm/Italy 2025 to reserve your spot today. That's mysterious.fm/Italy 2025.